So, Thomas Conroy, so you're on the stage now. Why don't you give us your?
All right, this kind of works. Can you see it? Is that too small?
It's perfect.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you everyone for being here and great presentation so far. My name's Thomas. I'm a Cornell grad in 2024, just finished my PhD there. And since then, I launched starting SensVita. We're making next generation sensors for continuous, passive, touchless cardiopulmonary monitoring. So I'd like to start this a little differently and actually start by talking about our technology itself, and then I'll get into what we want to do with it. So our technology is called near field radio frequency sensing. Well, what does that mean? What that means is we can do touchless, wearable, or in furniture sensors that is like a radar. Think about radar usually tracks something that's really far away, but we can track how your heart and lungs are moving instead. This lets us do really convenient assessment of your cardiac health, your pulmonary health, for a whole host of different applications and in a really flexible way. We worked on this technology. I worked on it for 5 years during my PhD. We have over 20 publications validating a bunch of different endpoints, and now it's really a matter of, okay, what can we do with it? And that's the fun task that SensVita is taking on. So I'd like to start by giving you an overview on what we see as the opportunities here, and walk you through each of the things we're looking at. So the opportunity we're really excited about, one of them, maybe the first one we were looking into, is remote patient monitoring of heart failure patients. So heart failure, and I'll get into this later, is a very common chronic illness, but remote patient monitoring is really key to keeping people from bouncing back to the hospital. Well, with an accurate touchless sensor, you can do fully passive remote patient monitoring to make it really convenient for patients and really increase the number of people willing to enroll in these programs. We've done a bunch of customer interviews in the space. We actually have NSF funding coming in soon to start building these devices. This one area we've looked at. But you can give this same data to everyday people outside of a clinical environment in wellness products. And we have interest in co-developed products in the wellness space. Then switching gears a bit, the defense industry and monitoring warfighters for injury is a whole other space that we're really interested in ways to increase the amount of data we have on warfighters to make sure we detect and treat injuries as soon as possible. We submitted a proposal to DARPA. We are the top rated proposal of over 60 entries. We're still talking with them. I actually have a meeting with them in a couple hours. And finally, animal health. Radio waves don't care about fur. So there's a whole bunch of applications in animal health we've talked about. So really what I'm trying to say with all this is we're not just one sensor for one thing. We're really trying to develop a universal sensor platform for human and animal health. Now, I'm not going to take 30 minutes of your time. I can't talk about all of these. Let's start with talking about heart failure a little bit. So hospital readmission in heart failure is a critical issue. Heart failure costs the US over $30 billion a year from just about 7 million patients. 75% of that cost comes from hospitalizations because over half of heart failure patients will get readmitted to the hospital within just 6 months of their initial discharge. This increases mortality rates. It increases costs on hospitals. It's a really key issue that we need to solve. And when you look at current solutions, it's kind of easy to see why this happens. There's really two buckets. There's self-care, which is you send patients home with a scale, a blood pressure cuff. This have pretty low compliance rates over a long period of time. We spoke to one hospital and only 20% of their patients kept doing their daily readings after about a year. To solve that issue, you could just implant the monitor in people. This costs almost $70,000 out of pocket, and it's invasive. So despite these devices providing really great data, the market penetration rates are in the single digits usually. So there's really a gap for something that can solve this tension between compliance and convenience. And that's what we want to build. So we want to make on-bed near-field radio frequency, or NFRF, sensors that can do accurate, 100% compliant remote patient monitoring. You get to 100% compliance by putting the sensor somewhere that patients go every day, which is their bed. So what this sensor will do is enable daily reports of patients' cardiopulmonary status, how they're sleeping, their difficulty breathing while they sleep, the volume of their heart, to guide therapeutic decisions like drug doses and lifestyle decisions, which will reduce hospitalizations, which saves hospitals money and saves patients' lives. And don't just take our word for it. We've done a bunch of interviews in this space, and these are real quotes from heart failure physicians we've talked to and partnered with, mentioning how early detection is really the key bottleneck in heart failure that's keeping us from treating it better, and how our technology can really assist older populations who resist these invasive devices that currently exist. And when you look at the competition, it's easy to see how we stand out. Like I mentioned, there's implantable devices that have high compliance but low affordability. There's wearable devices that people don't use for more than, call it 30 to 60 days. But with a passive solution that can provide the data of a wearable device with the convenience of something that's with you all the time, we can really achieve low cost, high adherence, and accurate remote patient monitoring starting in heart failure. So now I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about defense. It's a different injury or a different market, but also really exciting for us and one we have some promising traction in. So the key problem in defense is injuries and hemorrhage specifically. Hemorrhage is the cause of over 90% of preventable battlefield mortality and something that all of our agencies are really trying to prevent. And the best way to prevent it is early detection. Talk to any battlefield physician, they'll mention the golden hour, where you have about an hour to detect these issues and begin treatment where you can really make a difference. But current solutions really fall short in this area. There's a couple of options right now. You can use ultrasound, but this requires a person there with an ultrasound probe. So it's not real time. Or you can use light-based tools like are in an Apple Watch called photoplethysmography. These have other issues like temperature sensitivity, and they're black box algorithms. And the proof is really in the pudding. Neither of these tools are used on all of our warfighters today for real-time injury detection. So there's still a gap and something that the defense industry is looking to fix. So our product concept that we've gone to DARPA and other agencies with is integrating near-field RF sensors directly into uniforms. Our sensors are lightweight, they're low power, and they can monitor the volume of your heart continuously. And we have preliminary data on this. This is from animal models, of course, on inducing simulated hemorrhage, and we can really accurately detect, hey, there's blood loss happening. We need to treat this person now. So this is our concept that we've gone to DARPA. We've gotten really good feedback and sort of a separate application of our sensing technology. And some of the advantages that they really like is because it's lightweight and low power, right around a milliwatt level power, we can finally enable continuous warfighter monitoring. This works not just for injuries, but also for optimizing training, ensuring warfighters are ready with obvious analogs in fitness and health later on. And what this can do really is automate triage. So when the event happens, we know who's critical and we know how to help them as soon as possible. So we've been working on SensVita for about a year total. And it was nice to see a fellow Runway giving a presentation. We also joined the Runway Startup Postdoc program in September of this year. And that helped us get down into this New York City community and help us fundraise. And we'll be receiving a NSF Phase 1 STTR grant in hopefully a couple weeks, which is really exciting for us. Like I mentioned, we submitted a proposal to DARPA. We were the #1 proposal out of about 60 entries, and we're still talking with them about how we can work together. And we have multiple offers to pilot our devices once we use our NSF money to get to a prototype we're happy with. So SensVita, the team is led by me. I've been working on this technology for over 5 years and similar ones for about 10. My co-founder is a senior executive at a Fortune 50 medical device company. He has experience in regulated device innovation, hiring, management, all the things that a new PhD doesn't quite have yet. And Professor Edwin Kahn, he was my thesis advisor. He's a co-PI on this NSF grant. He invented this technology and he's helping us along as well. So we are SensVita. We're making next generation sensors for cardiopulmonary monitoring for a whole host of market opportunities. We're starting our pre-seed round pretty soon, so please stay in touch. And we'd love introductions to relevant investors or anyone in the space. We'd love to keep connecting, keep talking more. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. That was very good. So we have a few questions right off the bat. So does the data from the sensor go directly to the patient or the doctor?
Yes, in heart failure that we would sell to hospitals directly. And this data, there's actually for billing code requirements, the data needs to go directly to for certain billing codes. The data needs to go directly to doctors rather than through patients to ensure accuracy. People aren't putting in the wrong numbers. Um, so yes, the ideal customer profile in heart failure is hospitals that have value-based care contracts for their heart failure patients. These are hospitals that preferably payer provider, like integrated hospitals, but these hospitals have a direct incentive towards the long-term cost of care. And these are the hospitals we see investing in remote patient monitoring at a much higher rate than fee-for-service hospitals. So we would sell to the hospitals. We would be the technology provider for their remote patient monitoring programs. They'd enroll a patient, we'd send them our device, and the data would go straight from there to the doctor.
Excellent. I think that answers the other question about who your customer is, the patient or the doctor, for sure. Another important question in terms of commercialization, are you thinking of developing the heart failure application alongside the military application, or will one take the lead? Obviously, you're looking at two very different
Oh yeah,
commercialization
yeah.
pathways.
So right now our immediate milestones are technical. So that's why we have the NSF grant to and our goal while we have multiple market opportunities, we should by middle of this year have a really strong prototype from this grant. And then we'll go do pilot studies and gauge the customer pull, as I heard it mentioned earlier, like which customers really need it. And that's where we're going to start. We'd like to start somewhere where we can get revenue a bit sooner. That'll let us iterate on the device, mature as a company. Where heart failure, while we're confident in the need, it's going to take a little longer to get revenue in that space. So, and meanwhile, we've had a lot of good feedback from the defense world. That's why I wanted to mention both of them today. So, still assessing. It's going to depend on our pilot studies, is the short answer.
Mm-hmm. Another more technical question. Are you concerned about the different heart rate indications during sleep versus waking hours?
Heart rate indicate. So, I presume this is about heart failure. So in heart failure, some of the key things we're looking at is symptoms like orthopnea or fluid buildup in the lungs and how that impacts respiratory rhythm at night. Um, we've done a lot of work on sleep apnea detection and sleep apnea, COPD, and other chronic illnesses. That's really what we're going to try and leverage in heart failure mostly. It's actually mostly on the lung side because as fluid builds up in the lungs and especially in people lay down, it covers more of the lung, you get more difficulty breathing. Um, we'll see what cardiac features we actually are going to be necessary, but we think the pulmonary side might be more interesting in heart failure.
Great. Let's see. And then who are your current competitors?
Well, I presented 4 markets, so there's a lot of them in all of these. But in heart failure specifically, I think you'd consider the standard of care in self-care as these remote patient monitoring companies that sell a scale, a blood pressure cuff, that's sort of the baseline. And then there's these wearable options that are coming into the market as well, like the Zoll heart failure management system, and a couple others. Those would be the key competitors. The key differentiator is the fact that, frankly, we don't have to touch the skin, which means we can use a in furniture, in bed sensor, which we believe in through our customer discovery will make patients enroll for longer periods of time, get data every single day. Um, I talked to one doctor about the Zoll device as an example. It's prescribed for 90 days, and he said none of my patients have ever made it past 60 because they want to take it off, and it's like a patch that sticks on your chest all the time. So that's how we differentiate. And of course, there will be a class of heart failure patients for whom this makes the most sense for. We'll start with.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think that does it for our pitches. If there are any questions, let's see. Hold on. There's one more question. There are new applications integrated into bed mattress liners that
Mm-hmm.
keep track of heart rates and sleep cycles. Have you looked into any of these?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to try and differentiate that there's a bunch of a class of sensors that are in bed sensors. What we're trying to differentiate is really the detail that we can measure with, which is why we're focusing not just on we're a sleep tracker will sell you. We're focusing on something more clinical, because our sensing technology can get things like the respiratory volume and rhythm, like not just respiratory rate, but how deep are they breathing? What kind of sleep apnea do they have? And like I mentioned on the cardiac side, and we saw what are there arrhythmias? Is there a third heart sound? So more clinically relevant features. So that's why we're starting on this clinical side, because that's how we differentiate from what's mentioned there, heart rate, respiratory rate sensors that already exist.
Awesome. Good. Okay, well, I think that's it. Thank you, Thomas. Let's give Thomas a great big hand here. And we have network